All right,
Am I supposed to do something too?
yeah, let's do something. All right, so I'm Kaz Weirdness, aka Kaz Weirdness, and today we're going to be interviewing the very talented, the very funny, the very handsome Stan
Ooh.
Yan. Stan is a comics and graphic novel illustrator and writer. He's also a caricature artist and a children's book author and illustrator. And Stan teaches sequential illustration at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. And he also happens to be a dear friend. Welcome, Stan.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me this morning. So I thought we'd start off with, can you just tell us a little bit about how you became an artist? I know you didn't start out in the art industry. So can you tell us a little bit about your whole life?
My whole life. Well,
Specifically art parts. Yeah.
actually, my earliest memories being able to hold a pencil were of me drawing the same character over and over again, doing different things in these boxes that I later found out were called panel borders. So I was drawing comics before I even realized that that's what I was doing. So
and was it like your own made up character that you
yeah.
were?
Oh yeah. So yeah, they were just stick figures at that time, but they were superheroes. I really don't know that they really had any powers. My main guy kind of he looked like Gallagher. He had a bald head and his hair, it just really long hair in the back, but that showed like how fast he was. So that was his superpower. So his hair would go straight back, and he had a carrot for a nose.
Awesome. Were you inspired by something? Were you like reading comics at the time, or is this from like cartoons
I think
or
I was
movies that
reading
you're
comic
watching?
strips,
Comic
mostly
strips?
comic strips at the time because I had a short attention span, and I was not a voracious reader, to be honest with you. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a story that I've heard from a lot of my comic artist friends too, that they actually learned to read because they were reading comics, whether they be comic strips or comic books. And for me, there was instant gratification with a comic strip.
Sure.
Get a punchline in 3 to 4 panels. Unless it's a single panel gag, then
Right,
you
like the
get the
Far
laugh
Side.
right away. Yeah, or I guess back then it was Dennis the Menace and Family Circle, and
Right.
Circus.
Circus. Oh, what was your favorite comics, do you think? Do you have ones that stand out in your memory?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the first comic that probably influenced me as an artist was Garfield.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, right.
Garfield was
Jim Davis.
he was very deliberate about his line stroke, where you could actually tell he was using something like a nib or a brush that went from thin to thick to thin again,
Mm-hmm.
and that just fascinated me. And I
Even as a
actually
kid, you were
didn't,
noticing that.
yeah,
Wow.
and I loved it. I loved just the personality of the line, and but I didn't know that he was using a brush or a nib until I was 17.
Do, do you know what he's using now? I mean, I'm not even sure I know what he's using.
Yeah, he's using a studio of like 12 other artists, and he doesn't draw.
Oh. Yeah, that's fascinating to me that even as a young kid you were noticing like
And I was trying to
growth.
recreate that stroke just by using whatever I had, a felt tip pen, and
Hmm.
going over and over and over it and trying to create the thickness in the middle while keeping the ends thin, and things like that.
Wow.
There's like a lot of like middle ground of my history as well. So,
Hmm.
I've just constantly, like my dad used to work at a place that used to throw out reams and reams of computer printouts.
Uh-huh.
And most of the time they only printed on one side. So he'd bring paper home, and I always had, when I had nothing else to do, I wanted to draw. And so I always had something to draw on.
Hmm.
And so, having one blank side was good enough. So I had to make my own comic books and staple them together. And every time you turn the page, it probably had some company secrets that I probably shouldn't have left in my dad's
Right.
office, but I didn't care. My main goal is to create something to show to my mom and dad. So look at the story I made.
Oh, that's
And I
awesome.
remember some of my earliest comic books were honestly ripoffs of movies that I just saw that I was really influenced by. So I actually, after I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I tried to make a Close Encounters comic book. I didn't get very
Wow.
far just because at that age, that movie was way over my head.
Right.
And, so I think I got through some of the early
Do,
scenes.
do, 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 do. But don't you think, I mean, you're talking about something being derivative, but don't you think that's a great way to learn and try and dip your toe into what other successful properties are doing, is by
Yeah.
mimicking in a way, or at least as a beginner?
Well, I mean, even if you want to like take it from the artwork standpoint, I think it's useful. You know, I've told students time and time again that there's nothing wrong with being influenced by particular artists and copying stuff just to see, you know, what you like about their artwork and how you might be able to incorporate it into your own art style. I mean, as long as you're not trying to sell it.
Right.
That's a good way of learning technique and maybe finding your own style as well. So there's a huge amount of challenges. So, you know, actually coming up with a efficient process and a style that doesn't take you forever is actually really important, I think, because and so when I'm teaching students, especially those that want to do a more realistic or hyper realistic or a detailed style, like
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're doing fantasy stories or science fiction stories where the readers are spoiled with like just the lush and garish details that the
Right.
artists leave in their illustrations. You can't be photo referencing everything, and if you're doing fantasy and science fiction, you probably can't, because
Right.
a lot of the stuff you've got to invent and create. So being able to draw representational artwork is also important.
So I know that you were an accountant before you went in. So how did that?
No, I studied accounting in college. My grades actually weren't good enough, thanks to my upper division accounting classes, to get a job in accounting at that time. So I was actually a stockbroker for 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah, 13 years. Your magic number, 13.
It is my magic number, but not if you're a stockbroker. That's definitely unlucky. So, so how did you make the transition out? I mean, that was that frustrating for you, being in a I mean, I would imagine it's a fairly uncreative profession when at heart you're an artist. I mean, you are.
Well, actually, it wasn't, you know. I think because, I mean, granted, I had long hours. I was working like 10 hours a day, um, you know, selling products that I had no personal connection to. Then I would come home at night and I would actually draw my comic stories for 3 or 4 hours every night. That was kind of my release. It was my muse. I mean,
Mm,
that proves that this is what, you know, I should
yeah.
be doing. This is my passion, because I was doing it without really any financial goal in mind, you know.
Right.
At that time, you know, granted, I was producing my self-published comic books and selling them at local comic book conventions, but I didn't really plan on making a living off of it. It was just almost kind of an accident, because when I was in college, all of my electives were in the art department. Surprise, surprise.
Right.
And for one of my drawing classes, they kind of let us do whatever we wanted for our final project. So I decided to do a comic book, which was a superhero parody, where the characters were really based on my college friends. And
Awesome.
so really the story was for them. But then I started taking this comic book to these local, essentially there were comic book swap meets, you know, a bunch of guys with their long boxes that their wives told them they needed to get out of storage or clean up the house or whatever. And people were buying this book and like asking me for like the next edition and the next edition. And I was like, these people don't even know me. And to me, that was kind of addictive, because for me, it's really always been about the storytelling and not necessarily about doing the drawings. The drawings were a vehicle for telling my stories.
You know, for someone that's building their portfolio and wants to get into comics, do you recommend doing artist alleys? Like, what venues or outlets or what things should they start with? Like what should they put most of their energy towards besides like drawing and creating
It
art?
depends on what your goal is. So if your goal is to get your own stories that you wrote out there, then the most important thing for you to do is to build your fan base.
Hmm.
So your portfolio online will help you to get maybe illustration jobs, and having a portfolio at a comic book convention or any sort of fan based convention might help you connect with some of those people. But then again, your publications and your prints, all of your merch will help you too.
Hmm.
I don't think it's as necessary to have your portfolio unless you're actually selling pages out of your portfolio, which
Oh,
can
like at a convention, you don't need to necessarily have a portfolio at a
right
convention.
now, if you're not looking to write your own stories, but you're looking to illustrate stuff, and your dream is um, to illustrate for Marvel or DC or one of these companies where you don't have, they're the ones that own the intellectual property, then it is imperative that you have a portfolio, but not only a portfolio, but a portfolio of sequential pages, um, of the character that you want to illustrate. Okay. So
So
if you,
specific to
yeah, the
those
story,
companies.
and you can actually take um, actual scripts from, like, they post the scripts on the internet
Oh, they do.
for people to re-illustrate. So if you want to be a penciler, pencil the pages based on the scripts from stuff that's already been published. If you want to be an inker, you can also look for pencils by professional artists out there already, so that you can like say, okay, this is what you know Jim Lee's pencils look like, and this is my inks over them. You're going to have to start as an interior artist before they let you even touch a cover.
Right.
And then you work
So
your way
make sure that you have those interior samples, like
up.
it's
So
probably
don't just have cover art unless you're just amazing. I mean, I know that some people that probably just jumped into, if you're like Alex Ross quality right now, then you probably don't need interior illustrations in your portfolio. Just post all of your paintings in your
well,
in your
that's
portfolio.
not too many of us though. So yeah, I think that's good advice. And how do you get your portfolio seen? What do you feel about, is social media a good way to get yourself out there? Like how
Social
do you
media is imperative, because chances are, like, if you talk to a comic book publisher, they're going to tell you, come to San Diego Comic Con, get in a line, get a number to get in a lottery, and if your lottery number is picked, then you have a chance to be one of the thousands seen, to get your portfolio seen. If not, come back next year and spend
wow.
another $5,000 being out here.
That feels daunting. So what you're saying is, I mean,
Don't go to Comic
don't
Con
do that.
necessarily, but go to some of the smaller conventions.
Got
Like,
it.
I've heard that you can do just as much or better marketing at places like, and I've, you know, full disclosure, I haven't been to these conventions, so this is secondhand knowledge. Conventions like WonderCon or Emerald City Comic Con, um, that some of these publishers are at.
Hmm.
Now, like, if you go to Denver Pop Culture Con, a lot of the major publishers, like Marvel and DC, may not have editors to look at portfolios there, but you'll have, some of the mid-level publishers will be there that might have the ability to look at your portfolios. People like start working for smaller publishers and work their way up, so you'll work for, and Ape Entertainment, or work your way up to working for Dark Horse, and then before you know it, you're working for Marvel and DC.
Right. Well, I think that's smart in a lot of industries where there's a lot of competition to, not put yourself in, it's like traffic, why would you put yourself in uh, rush hour traffic with all these other cars when there's all this potential to, choose a off off street at an off time. Like there are smaller publishers, there are lots of ways of breaking into the
Right,
industry that aren't just the big houses or the big companies.
right.
And you might find your way up into those big companies just through the process of breaking in and doing the work and
Yeah.
meeting people and networking.
Well, and a lot of that advice was given to me by one of the writers for Marvel and DC, Gail Simone, and she was telling people that you know, by the time the editor has seen your portfolio at Comic Con, all that's on their mind is where they're going to eat and get a drink after the convention. And
Right.
so, unless you're just completely and utterly amazing, and your work is something groundbreaking and new, uh, they've by the time your portfolio review is done, they've probably forgotten about you.
Right.
Uh, but it's not that they're never looking for new talent. They're always looking for new talent. They're just not looking for it in the way that you thought. So if you talk to someone who's illustrating for Marvel and DC and they tell you how they got in, that's probably not the same way you're going to be able to get in, because
Right.
those types of publishers typically they're not really honest about the ways to get into the publishing industry.
Hmm.
Uh, they're just like creating gatekeepers because they don't want to get overwhelmed by submission.
Yeah.
So having an online presence is important. And she said like a lot of the people that get hired on to do illustrations for them are people that are doing their own regularly updating webcomic. And
Awesome.
a lot of the editors are fans of these webcomics and then reach out to these people to have them illustrate for them. And so that's
That's
just some of the
great.
ways.
That's
Yeah.
great advice. And basically, besides your time and investment in posting these things, those are essentially free things that you can do. And especially if you're like excited about and there's something you want to say and you're having fun doing it, like why wouldn't you have a web comic? What would you say as far as best social media to be on? Like Instagram, we all know about.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's different for everyone. I mean, for me, I've had the most success developing my following on Facebook just because I've been on it the longest. And
Yeah, same
I
here.
think there's a little more interactivity there for me because I'm not just one to like shout out there into the ether and hope that, people, like my photo of me in my sparkly jumpsuit or whatever.
Hey!
But for me, like, yeah, every social media has uh, a different purpose. So for me, Instagram, I've never really been able to figure out how to monetize it very well, but I love Instagram just because for me, it's inspiration. It's like a very visually centric medium where I don't have to slog through a lot. And most of the people that I follow are caricature artists or children's book authors
Mhm.
or graphic novelists. So as I'm scrolling through, I can get instant inspiration.
Right.
And I, from what I understand, a lot of editors and agents do like that as a way of looking at artists' art as well. And
Mhm.
then Twitter, I've always felt like, well, shoot, the people that make it work are already famous and don't need it. For me, I'm lucky to get a like on anything that I post. But then I found out about those Twitter pitches where
Uh-huh.
you have 280 characters to a day to pitch your story idea to an agent or editors that are participating in this. And as a writer illustrator, it's a lot easier, I think, than just as a writer, because then you have permission to post an image that
Right.
you illustrated so that you can pair your art with your story idea.
Mhm.
And that actually helped me when I was in the process of trying to find an agent, because that gave me a whole bunch of other agents that I didn't have on my list ahead of time, and some
Right.
of them that aren't open to unsolicited submissions anyway, but they're still looking for new clients. They just, again, don't want to get inundated, so this is the way they're going to do it, is through
Right.
Twitter pitch.
I think that's great advice. So, I mean, I feel that way on Twitter too. I just feel like I'm shouting into a pit, like no one's hearing it. But if I'm doing a challenge, And I think what you're saying about doing the pitches, those pitch opportunities, you know, they're going to be looking for those hashtags, and they're going to be looking at what's coming up, especially if the art is good. It's an interesting idea, and that is definitely a way to get, you know, I hear all the time people getting book deals off of doing challenges, or getting agents from doing a pitch.
Well, and the thing that really helped me was hashtag GN, graphic novel.
Oh,
Graphic novels in the children's book industry are highly in demand. I mean, ask any children's book elementary school librarian or middle school librarian. All the graphic novels are flying off of their shelves, and kids have to read them over and over again because they don't have enough graphic novels to facilitate their hunger for the medium.
My agent said the same thing. It's like books that I'm working on. He's like, I mean, I don't want to force you to do something you don't want to do, but can you do this as a graphic novel? Because, you know, getting 3-book deals that are going into auction, like these publishers are wanting those graphic novels. So I'd go off of that too. If you're someone who likes to do sequential art, someone who knows comics and has any interest in doing, good graphic novels.
I can't help it.
Now is
the
the
I see
time.
stories, you know?
Absolutely do graphic novels. And I like the tip about using the hashtag G. And I think this has been great information. Thank you so much, Stan. So the fun questions, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color is plaid. No, that's the pattern. It's orange, actually. It has nothing to do with the Denver Broncos necessarily, but it's actually the kind of that burnt orange, the Texas Longhorns orange. I think I look really good in it, honestly.
What medium do you like working in best?
Right now, digital, because
Digital?
it fills my ability to have immediate gratification, but the ability to edit things easily if I need to. As a sequential storyteller, processes everything, and that right now is a very, very important part of my process.
Got it. What's your favorite digital program?
Procreate. Procreate, I feel like, gives me the best of all worlds, where it's got a lot of flexibility, like Photoshop, to create a lot of layers, but it gives me a better ability to create traditional looking media. And for me, I'm not as particular as other people, but there's a lot of developers that develop these brush packs that you can actually purchase and download.
Do you have a favorite brush or brush pack?
No, I use defaults, actually.
Oh, really?
That came with Procreate, and they've actually added a few more with the latest edition of Procreate, which gives you all the animation and a lot of the, you know, effects like warping and things like that they didn't used to give you. But right now, I love, I use the most the dry ink brush for line work. And I use the 6B pencil tool just for all my planning. But if I'm trying to do like a colored pencil effect, I might use that as well, or that in conjunction with the shading graphite, I think it's called. But more recently, I've also fallen in love with a couple that look like watercolors. There's one that, if you're not doing like a too small of a brush tip, fresco looks pretty good. What is the other one called that I use a lot? It's called water brush, I think it's what it's called. And then they have some this whole new category it's called drawing now, and they have a few that I've used to create what I feel like look more like watercolor effects. But these
this all just comes in Procreate.
Yeah.
And you're using an Apple Pencil to draw on your screen?
Yep.
Perfect. My next question is, who are your art heroes? Who inspires you?
Bill Watterson, hands down, as a writer as well, not just as an artist.
Master.
He probably has influenced me more than anyone, even though my art really, I don't think really looks like anything like Watterson's.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's got like the best marriage of writing and art of anyone that,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And what finished project are you promoting right now? You get to put in your plug right now.
Oh, yes. Well, right now, my finished project is There's a Zombie in the Basement, which is a children's book that was inspired by my son's fear of my zombie caricature artwork. Um, I'm on my third printing of it,
Oh,
actually,
that's
which
awesome.
includes redesigns of my evil twins character in it, which is, they're drawn the way that they're drawn in an upcoming project that I'm hoping I get a publishing contract on here pretty soon, called Salem Charter Academy, where my zombie girl from There's a Zombie in the Basement is the main character of. But anyway,
Awesome.
when I do my school visits, I can do readings and interactive monster drawing demos where I show the kids, or I try to draw things that the kids are afraid of and draw non-scary versions of them on the spot. But I also
Yeah,
show them how to use simple geometric shapes to create characters that you can repeat over and over again. So you can, reposition the shapes, doing different actions before you add all the details. Because if you're gonna, draw a story, you're probably gonna have to draw your main character more than once.
that's awesome. And how can people find you? What's the best way to do your website address or?
My website is stanyan.me, but if you're specifically interested in finding information about my children's book, it's There's a Zombie in the Basement.com.
Got
No
it.
apostrophe or it won't go anywhere.
Just one word. And I'll be sure to put the information on screen too so people
Okay.
can see it.
All right.
And I love waffles. If you had to describe your personality as one food, what would it be?
My personality as a food. I mean, I know what my favorite food is,
So
but I
what's
don't
your
know.
favorite food?
My favorite food are these little Japanese desserts called mochi.
Mm.
They have it's a glutinous rice dough around the outside of a sweet red bean paste.
I think that describes your personality pretty
Oh
well.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, nice texture, and you're very sweet on the inside, and
Or
you're
depending on who
interesting,
you
lots of different
ask,
flavors.
because the texture does not jive with my wife. And you have more than once described to me as being gross, and that's exactly how she describes the texture of the mochi. So I
Yeah,
guess that is appropriate.
I would never describe you as gross. I've never had to leave a critique meeting because I was.
So hopefully you guys are detecting that sarcasm.
You're not just a promotion king, you're also a gross out king, but I continue to love you. Lots of great information during this interview, and I just really appreciate you taking the time with us. And I will see you soon on the
Okay,
interwebs.
sounds good. Take care.
You too. Bye.